China has launched military drills around Taiwan.
Ukraine will now be getting F-16 fighter jets from Denmark and the Netherlands.
This is not the only pseudonym that Joe Biden is accused of using. There's another one that is Peter Henderson.
Robert L. Peters.
Pedo Peter, the big guy.
The former president faces a fourth very serious indictment.
We know 100 people are confirmed dead from those wildfires that destroyed more than 2,000 structures, homes, and other buildings, some over a century old. Authorities estimating it could cost over $5 billion to rebuild the popular destination of Lahaina alone. But this morning, a sign of hope for those who are praying for Maui's recovery. Maria Lanakila Catholic Church, it opened more than 175 years ago. Look at that beautiful structure, is still standing tall, untouched by the flame.
The president spoke for the first time yesterday on the historic disaster, a full 8 days after the blaze first arrived.
I've spoken to Governor Josh Green multiple times and reassured him the state will have everything it needs from the federal government. I immediately approved the governor's request for expedited major disaster declaration. That's a fancy word of saying whatever you need, you're going to get.
The administration announced that they were going to be paying $700 per affected household, a number that in light of recent stimulus checks and I think in light of other kinds of disaster relief, and particularly in light of the funds that are being sent to Ukraine, many are balking at.
And watch as this security camera captures what could be an early trigger in that devastating wildfire. August 7th at 10:47 p.m., a day earlier. You hear a witness describe a flash that might be a tree falling on a power line.
It's windy and then there's a flash, and I think that's when a tree's falling on a power line.
Freaking power line just went down. See them right there, that's the power line that started from up the road there, and all of that is still burning.
He called emergency services as a row of flames ignited in the dry grass below. He used a garden hose to wet down his property. So far, there's been rampant speculation that power lines are to blame for sparking the fires. A lawsuit has already been filed, but there's been no definitive evidence.
According to the Civil Beat, a state water official delayed the release of water that landowners wanted to help protect their property from fires. According to the report, the water standoff played out over much of the day, and the water didn't come until too late, according to sources.
I know that the alarm system failed. They didn't go off. The text message system failed because cell service was bad. Are you hopeful that they will intervene and protect Lahaina as a place for locals and tourists, but a place for locals instead of real estate investors looking to rebuild it differently than what it was?
The police chief says loved ones who cannot find their family should go to the Family Assistance Center and do a DNA swab so they can identify loved ones.
He faces one in Washington, D.C. for his efforts to overturn the election and his efforts around the January 6th, 2021 insurrection. He faces charges of mishandling documents in Florida. Those are federal charges as well. And he faces charges in New York State for a scheme to pay off a former porn star he allegedly had an affair with to quiet her ahead of the election. This one would be another very serious series of charges against the former president. And in those state charges, unlike the federal charges, if he becomes the president, he doesn't have the pardon rights over those state charges. Well, the crazy thing is that the more often he's indicted, the more money he raises, and believe it or not, the higher his poll numbers go among Republican voters. It seems counterintuitive, but those voters, according to polls, seem to feel that attack on him is an attack on his voting base as well. But in a more technical sense, there is nothing in the Constitution that says you cannot run for president if you've been convicted of a crime. There's an exception for treason, but that's not exactly what these charges are. One could make the argument that he should not be able to run again because of that, but that would be something that would have to be tested in court. And of course, nothing like that has ever happened before. So now Trump can continue going forward with his campaign. His campaign has already issued a statement saying these charges could have been leveled more than 2 years ago. He says they're just an attempt to derail his efforts to win the presidency again.
Amber, it's been revealed through FOIA requests that President Joe Biden allegedly used the fake name Robert L. Peters when emailing his son's business associates, including using it to schedule secret calls with the president of Ukraine at the time. House Committee on Oversight and Accountability Chairman James Comer has called on the National Archives and Records Administration to provide records related to then Vice President Biden's official duties that might have overlapped with his son's activities in Ukraine.
The only person that's copied on the email besides those two is coincidentally Hunter Biden. And in this email, they discuss this meeting that they're planning to have with the then president of Ukraine. And we know that Biden, as vice president at the time, was involved in Ukrainian matters and that he had bragged about his ability to get Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor at the time who was looking into Burisma, fired. And this is not the only pseudonym that Joe Biden is accused of using. There's another one that is Peter Henderson. And there have been several emails between this so-called Peter Henderson and Hunter Biden where he does sign the emails, "Love Dad." It seems like they've been using all kinds of code names for Joe Biden throughout the past 10, 20 years. And then there's another thread of this that makes it even more, I think, believable that these pseudonyms did in fact belong to Joe Biden, which is that Hunter Biden, according to the release of his laptop, had his father saved in his phone as Pedo Peter, which is disturbing on multiple levels. Obviously, I would love to know why he is calling his dad a pedo, whether that has anything to do with the revelations from Ashley Biden's diary about the weird showers that they had together.
Their kids and grandkids go to these schools, and there's a lot of rumors about Joe Biden's family. And that family friends, when they go over to the Biden house for dinner and functions, that the young women are not allowed around Joe Biden or alone in a room with him. That tells me everything I need to know about who Joe Biden is if your family friends aren't allowing the young girls of the family to be alone in a room with you.
After Western Canada's British Columbia declared a state of emergency following wildfires raging across hills and mountains, around 30,000 people are under evacuation orders, while another 36,000 were under alert to be ready to flee. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he had spoken with British Columbia Premier David Eby about the rapidly evolving devastating wildfire situation and pledged federal resources in responding to that disaster.
It's still an investigation that's ongoing. Authorities don't know the cause of that explosion quite yet. This happened in a place called San Cristobal, which is just outside the capital of Santo Domingo, and a place called the Old Market, which is a very populated area. People go there for shopping. It was very crowded when this explosion happened. At least 10 people have died as a result. 11 people, authorities say, remain missing, so that death toll likely to go up, and dozens of additional people were injured. Authorities saying that they're looking into the idea that maybe some business operating illegally or in an unsafe way might have caused this explosion, but this investigation still ongoing at this point.
Warn them it's going to fall, say those above. The steep walls seem to be shifting, a cascade of rocks. Then the whole hillside collapses. As it hits the water, a tsunami wave, sweeping away everything in its path. From the other side of the valley, workers try to point out survivors.
Train tragedy has killed 34 people and injured at least 100 others after a passenger train derailed in the Sindh province on Sunday. The country's railway minister hinted that the tragedy could have happened due to a technical fault or even sabotage.
Now, fire investigators in southern Russia are trying to establish the cause of an explosion at a petrol station. At least 35 people were killed in Dagestan, children among the 80 injured. The fire started at a car repair shop in the regional capital and then spread to the petrol station next door.
The United States has approved sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. Friday morning, Russia temporarily halted operations in 4 major Moscow airports following an alleged drone strike on the capital city. 7 flights were diverted because of the closures of Moscow's Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Sheremetyevo, and Zhukovsky airports. Russian air defenses shot down a drone over the capital city overnight. Debris from the drone, in fact, fell into an exhibition center, as per reports, about 5 kilometers east of the Kremlin.
China has launched military drills around Taiwan, saying the exercises are a stern warning to Taiwan's leaders. The military's joint air and sea deployments are seen as a response to Taiwanese Vice President William Lai's latest visit to the United States. Taipei has condemned the drills, saying it has the ability to ensure its national security. China claims self-governed Taiwan as part of its territory and says it has no right to conduct foreign relations.
President Biden hosted an international summit at Camp David today.
We meet in this historic place to make a historic moment.
Bringing together Japan and South Korea, each longtime U.S. allies, but notably the two neighbors only recently softened their own decades of tension. Together now, facing common risks from North Korea's nuclear provocations and China's more aggressive show of military strength in the region, while also recognizing all 3 countries trade with China.
42 aircraft and 8 ships have been operating so far. 26 of those aircraft have crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait. This is the stretch of water that separates Taiwan from China, and there's a line through the middle of it, which for decades has formed there's been a tacit agreement between the two sides that military aircraft won't cross those barriers. Taiwan say that they've dispatched ships and planes to respond to these latest drills and is handling the situation. It's fair to say with these current drills, we're not at the level that we were at with previous incidences, but that we're even seeing these drills, even though William Lai, Taiwan's vice president, didn't really meet with any very senior US politicians and have visible interactions with them, really shows the direction of travel here for Beijing.
A place that has long symbolized the power of new beginnings and new possibilities.
The British Museum has been the victim of theft. Let me repeat that, a victim of theft. Social media has been rather quick to point out the irony. You see, the British Museum is a building filled with items stolen from around the world. The ancient treasures were looted from countries during the British imperial era. And reports say the workers stole jewelry and gold dating back to the 15th century BC. The pieces were not even on display. The museum says it is still trying to recover the artifacts. What could sound really embarrassing is that the stolen treasures worth over $60,000 were flogged on eBay for just nearly $50.